I do not believe that that is a headless guy on a motorcycle, but I do believe that there is something supernatural
Mm.
taking place there.
All right, what's up, everyone? We are here with James A. Willis, author and paranormal researcher. James, how's your day going, man?
So far, so good. How are you guys doing?
Good, good. We appreciate you hopping on. This is kind of a newer thing for us, diving into some interviews. But I'm so happy that we're starting with someone local too,
Yeah.
and very accomplished, which we'll definitely be getting into. Um, but you kind of wear two hats. You got the paranormal research side, you got the author side, which I definitely want to get into some writing later. But I know
Sure.
the people listening right now are probably more interested in the paranormal stuff. But talk a little bit about your background. I feel like there's different ways to get into the paranormal world. Charlie, he's more interested in the lore and the researching.
Yeah.
I'm a horror movie junkie, so I feel like everybody has their own way of kind of getting into things. What was it for you?
I guess I would be C, all of the above.
Okay.
Um,
Everything.
yeah, I usually tell people that I blame my parents because they chose to have me in the Hudson Valley of New York State. And so I grew up in a very, very weird area. I always tell people if they want to see why I'm so weird, just go around the Hudson Valley, especially in the fall. It is just a weird place. It's also home to Tarrytown, which was the setting for the Legend of Sleepy Hollow. So at
Mhm.
a very early age, I had people try to convince me that that was a true story. And to do that, they would take me out to Tarrytown and they would show me, the different settings, so you would see the bridge that the horsemen couldn't cross over. You would see all the different settings. And then if you went out to the cemetery, you would see the characters' names on the tombstones. And that freaked me out. And then I came to find out that Washington Irving, who's actually buried in that cemetery now, he liked everything that he saw in Tarrytown, including the names off of the tombstones. So I guess we could politely say he borrowed those.
Ah,
But at a very early age, that led me to question, okay, well, if that's not a true ghost story, what are the true ghost stories? So there's stories of me being 8, 9 years old, going on my first ghost hunt, which was basically begging my dad to take me out to a cemetery in broad daylight. He just let me run around and stood
That's
outside
adorable.
of the Duster car, just chain smoking cigarettes and watching me. So, but yeah, and then during the 70s into the 80s in the Hudson Valley, I was subjected to everything from the Son of Sam killings to Amityville Horror to they have the Kinderhook creature, which is their own version of Bigfoot, and I mean, you name it. UFO sightings. There was a major flap in the area in the 80s, a craft that I actually saw. So I was destined to become the weirdo that I proudly am today.
this is jumping ahead and based on what I want to get to, but I do have the 1980 UFO experience if you kind of want to.
You saw the UFO in Hudson?
Yes,
That's awesome.
twice actually. Yeah, and also saw the what they tried to kind of whitewash everything and say that was all part of a hoax, and they actually had amateur pilots, which is a scary thing in and of itself, but go up and they just had, well, they said were Christmas lights, but they were obviously a lot bigger, flying around to try to coming out of a Stewart Air Force airport up there. Um, I saw those as well. There was no confusing the two because the unexplained things that I saw, there was no sound and they were gigantic, and you could hear the engines from the planes as they were going overhead. So there's no mistaking the two.
Wow.
What was going through your mind as you were seeing this?
It's weird because I had already gotten into my first, because people always ask, they're like, do you get scared during those things, and I don't, because I think I've been doing it for so long. I tend to just be mystified and I just kind of am like, wow, this is really happening. I mean, there's a neat story that my wife, who's been with me on many of these adventures, but she also she sometimes will utter the phrase, I'm going to wait in the car on this one. But she knows that when I start, like if I think there's a ghost that's ready to appear or do something, I will talk to it like a long lost friend. I will say, I don't know who or what you are, but I have been searching my whole life for you. Could you just come closer and let me see you? Now, my wife, when she hears me talking like that, she knows it's about to go down and she tends to get freaked out. But yeah, when I saw both of the UFOs up in the Hudson Valley, oddly enough, I just stood there and just watched it. As a matter of fact, the first time that I saw it, I was driving home on what's known as the Quick Way, because it's all back roads. So you get on the 2-lane road, and it's suddenly called a Quick Way. But I was coming home. I was working in a record store, and I just closed down and had gotten on there and stuff. And I started noticing there's all these cars pulled on the side of the road. What are they doing? And then I looked over to where these people were looking, and I was like, whoa. And so I pulled over and stood there and watched this thing just kind of fly. Nobody said anything. And then the weirdest thing, once it went out of sight, we all just got in our cars and drove home.
That's gonna be
Which
so
sounds
surreal.
really, it
Yeah.
sounds so bizarre, but it was just kind of like, whoa, that's cool. And there was no, I'm dating myself now, but there were no cell phones. There was,
Yeah.
we didn't have cameras in our cars. So we just all looked at it and then went on home, and then 2 days later, it was in the newspaper, in our local newspaper. And I was like, wow. But yeah, it's kind of a letdown when you hear that. Like normal, it's like, I sprang into action and then suddenly,
Yeah.
Bigfoot came down and was running alongside the car. But no, we just watched it.
It's
I
gotta be like
think-
some kind of magic, basically.
Yeah.
Kind of.
It's crazy that you brought up the timing of it, because I don't know if you're a sports fan at all, but I was just thinking when they were like, LeBron just recently broke Kareem's scoring record, and the
Sure,
photo where Kareem did it, it's everybody's just watching, and then like if you see the photo
Yeah.
of LeBron that's going to be in like all the magazines, it's just everybody. But it's like you can't
Yes.
blame them. I mean, people bought
Exactly,
those tickets
yeah.
for that moment, so you don't blame them. But it is crazy how at that time, there'd be like 500 YouTube videos uploaded from that encounter, terribly shot, vertical.
Yeah.
Correct.
But
Right.
at the
Yeah.
time,
Twitter.
it's just, people taking it in, the way it was meant to be, right?
And it's funny you say that, because I've had my ghost organization since 1999, and the interesting thing is that we've run the gamut between going full bore high tech. We've got to have the most state of the art piece of equipment, and then we'll sit around. I mean, we have monthly meetings the first Sunday every month, and we'll sometimes get together and go, we could be so focused on waiting for this piece of equipment to flash or do whatever, that there could be a ghost standing right behind us, and we don't even acknowledge it. So then we'll swing the pendulum completely in the other direction, where it's like, we're just going to sit in a room and we're just going to let happen whatever's going to happen, and try to sort of make ourselves more open to the experience. So I get in a lot of trouble when I say this to about other ghost groups and stuff, but I believe in all this stuff. But I think in order to be taken seriously, we have to acknowledge nobody has the answers. Nobody does. Nobody even really knows what a ghost is. I mean, I don't. It makes my job easier, because people are like, how did the ghost do that? I'm like, I have no idea, but this is so cool, right? And I think that if you take that approach, it sort of opens you up to be like, okay, well, let's try it this way, or let's just do it a little different. Let's see what happens. Maybe we can find the answers.
So one more question, I'll let you dive in, because
It's
this is
okay.
going
I
to
just
lead.
do you know, I didn't know that Sleepy Hollow was not a real story, and I just found that right now.
So we go unbelievable.
I guess so.
We have to.
I
Yeah.
guess I did. I thought it was real.
Shoot, was I supposed to say spoiler alert? Sorry.
No. I feel like it's like
It's like I just got told
there's a
about
bunch.
Santa
I
Claus.
feel like a bunch of different Sleepy Hollows, and like I feel like every state has a Crybaby Bridge. I don't know,
It's true.
but
Well, don't
Go
get
ahead.
me started on that. Have you been to my website then?
yes.
Well, you've seen I've got 33 Crybaby Bridges that are
Yes.
listed.
I
Yeah,
went
that's
to one in I think it was Doylestown. It was nearby here. There was a winery I
Rogues
like out there.
Hollow. Rogues Hollow, yeah.
Yeah. And it's like it was the tiniest little bridge and there was all these cars behind me. And I was like, we can't stop. My wife's like, I'm gonna put voice recorder on my phone and stick my arm out the window as we drive over the bridge. I was like, okay, let me know how let me know how that works. But
But you're exactly right about the idea that everybody has one, because going back to me growing up in New York, we had the Crybaby Bridge. And then when I moved to Atlanta and was going to school down there, somebody said, "Hey, you want to go out check out the Crybaby Bridge?" And I'm like, "That's in New York." And they're like, "No, no, no, it's here." Same story. They took
mhm,
me out there. When I moved to Ohio and I started writing Weird Ohio, it was like, well, let me just see if they have one. And I'm like, oh, wait, they have two, oh, three, four, five. And I believe 13 of them, oddly enough, went into Weird Ohio. But that's when I started the Ohio Crybaby Bridge project, because I'm like, I'm going to find the bridge. And I just started posting it. And it was great because people were all like, telling me their stories about legend tripping, where they were like, "Oh, I did that when I was a kid." I'm always like, "Did it work?" No. It was fun though. But and so I've yet to find a bridge where I have found documented proof of an event that could have led to a haunting. I have found bridges that people were murdered on in Ohio, where bodies were dumped, all sorts of things like that. But I've yet to find the death of a child or a baby that would lead to the story.
that's probably for the best. Talk about the formation of Ghosts of Ohio.
It started, as I said, I think I got involved with in New York with my first group, I guess you could say professionally, in 1985. And when I moved to, and it's funny because looking back, we weren't called groups, or it was just we would get together and go look for ghosts. And the neat thing is I'm old enough that when I was getting into this, you had like Hans Holzer and even like the Warrens were going on like speaking tours and stuff. So to see them all of a sudden in person, you would get a totally different perspective of what people look at them today for. It was just like, wow, that's a little different. But when I moved to Georgia, and I was there from 94, 5, 6, somewhere in there until 99. And I was sort of, I guess, freelancing back there then. When I moved to Ohio in 1999, I was like, I'm going to get involved with another ghost group. And I looked and there were three at the time, which sounds incredible, but there were three and they didn't really fit what I was looking for. So I was sort of naive and arrogant enough to be like, well, I'll just start my own group. And I did. And I called it the Ghosts of Ohio because ghosts was plural and it was really just me. So it made it sound a lot bigger. But I was like, I want to operate as if we were ghosts and that we're always out there. But the people who really believed in us and needed us, we would be there for. And that's how it started. We still don't charge for anything that we do, and along the line, we continue to grow. Most of the members that are with me right now, I would say there's probably a core of 6 or 8 of them, and all of them have been with me over a decade individually. And they come from all different backgrounds, because what I'm looking for is I've sort of handpicked them all from total believers to total skeptics. And when we go out on an investigation, we then divide up all the materials and we go away. And as I said, once a month, we come back for our meeting and everybody puts forward their evidence or the things that they're like, let's take a look at this. And then what I'm looking for is we all fight. And I mean, not, don't think it's actually come to blows yet, but what I'm looking for is that at the end of the argument, or the I guess the colorful discussions, shall we say, I'm looking for across the board, the believers, the skeptics, and everybody else in the middle to say, I don't know. For the skeptic to say, I can't say what it is. I can't, debunk it, if you will. And for the believer to say, I can't figure out what it is either. Those are those nuggets that I'm looking for. So, um, I think people are actually surprised when they talk to me about how active the Ghost of Ohio is, because the vast majority of work that we do is for private residents. And so we don't ever say anything about where we're going. We don't give addresses. We don't even say like going on a residential investigation. If we do get something that is worth sharing for educational purposes, say for example we get something and I want to show it at a presentation I'm giving, we have to sit down with the owners, make sure this is the clip that we're going to show. You don't see faces, you don't see addresses, there's nothing that could identify it. um, so that's a real short version
So,
of how the
so you're
Ghost of
going
Ohio came about.
you're going for authenticity over a travel channel series.
Yes, I can, yeah, I think I can say that I have probably been approached to appear on almost every major and probably almost all of the minor reality shows that were out there. I was actually supposed to be on, and now I'm gonna totally blank. I was supposed to be on what became the Fear, MTV's Fear.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
But at that point in time, sorry, did you guys just disappear on me?
No.
No, we got you.
Oh, okay. My screen went blank.
You're good.
Cool. It wasn't called Fear. It was Road Rules.
Mm.
Where they traveled around a Winnebago and they would like stop at these different places. They had to do these sort of crazy things. Well, the one that they were going to do is I think it was Moundsville Penitentiary. They were going to have to stop there and do a ghost investigation. And then before that even aired, I was supposed to be like the ghost tour guide. That's when they said, well, no, this would actually make a good episode of a new pilot we're trying to do called Fear, which is, if you're not familiar with it, it's the same sort of premise. They would lock people in and they had to do paranormal dares. So I was supposed to be part of that until I got the contract. And I'm like, ooh, this is non-disclosures aplenty here. And that seems to be Scariest Places on Earth was another one I was approached for. And it gets to the point where I love what I do. I absolutely love it, but I also know that it's really not cool to show. It's not exciting to show somebody looking through microfiche, even if they really even don't even know what that is. But looking through papers and finding documentation and then sitting in a dark room for hours on end and nothing happens. I get how that would be boring, and it kind of is, but I wouldn't change that. So yeah, I got into all of this because I'm just like all the clients. I'm looking for answers. And so people have always told me, they're like, you should go on the show, you'd be really good. And I've been on a couple where I was the talking head, just saying things, but I personally don't like any of the ghost shows that are out there. I found that I, I get it from an entertainment perspective, but you guys know it's not. Reality and TV are two words that shouldn't come together.
Yeah,
And
sure.
when it first started, it was great because people were like, "Oh, so you're kind of like on those shows," and I was like, "Maybe." But now it's like, "Oh, wait, you're like one of those shows,"
Mm.
and I'm like, "No, it's not." I mean, when I do watch the shows, one show in particular, I root for the ghosts. Because when they come in and they're like, well, if you're here, why don't you do something? I'm like, get them. Because then something happens and they scream and run away. And I'm like, but that's what you wanted to have happen. So,
Yeah.
it's.
I feel like we know what show, but
Yeah.
yeah.
He was. They're begging for it.
Yeah.
Actually, that leads me to a question. Have you ever had an attachment follow you?
I have not. And believe it or not, I'm one of those twisted individuals that tries to get them to follow me home because the commute to do research would be so much shorter, you know? Um, I have not. We have had people in our group that they have actually felt that there was an attachment. We built, this is total Ghostbusters, but Um, we're trying to build a different one, an actual containment unit, because people would say to us, well, this, it's always a clown doll, but this doll is haunted, you know, and they're like, get it out of the house. And I'm like, I, I feel like I'm taking some, you know, there's some
Mhm.
of these shows where they're like, wow, this antique looks haunted. I should take it home to my lab. So what we did is we set up a thing where we could take things home and put it down in my basement, also known as the tomb, and put 360 cameras, EMFs, voice recorders, and basically put the item under surveillance. And I've never had any of them move or do anything. But the fascinating thing to me is that all of the people that we have removed these items from their house, the ghost goes away.
Hmm.
Now,
Mm.
how much of that is psychological and how much
Yeah.
is it
Yeah.
that the ghost thinks this Willis guy's boring? I'm going someplace else. I ain't going home with him, you know?
All
So,
he does
so
is look at
that to me is,
microfiche.
yeah, you know, so it's like, what's the deal here? But it's something that I find really intriguing. It's like, I don't think that, you know, the believer in me says just because it didn't follow this attached to this item and come home with me doesn't mean it wasn't there, doesn't mean it wasn't haunted. But also I can see the skeptical thing, which is like they have become convinced that there's something there, and by taking it out, it's gone. So it all
Yeah.
works well for the from a research perspective. But no, I haven't had anything follow me home. I and like I said, I've tried. I've tried to.
Um, I'm curious too because you said you have several people on your. Well, you said 6 to 8 people on your team, right?
As a core, yeah.
Yeah. Um, how do you find the differences between working in almost like a purely scientific method versus with like mediums that like empaths? Like, have you had both of those kinds of encounters with
Yeah. It's a great question. And again, I fall back on the fact that I've been doing it long enough that I kind of have a reputation out there where people are willing to, they either never want to work with me or they get where I'm coming from. Because early on, I would not, and I still don't take a psychic's words alone as being evidence. Because to me, especially if we're on a private investigation in someone's home, because as the quote unquote expert, if I come in there and I say, you have a ghost of a child in the corner there, we sense it, I know that I have just shattered their world, you know, because I have just now, the ghost expert, just confirmed that's in there. So I can't just say, well, somebody felt something there. What I still do, and I have members in the group that do believe that they have that ability, psychic, sensitive, that sort of thing. Um, how I work with them is if they'll tell me there's like, I feel something over there, or I think I see something over there. And then the more scientific members of the team will move equipment over there, because you know I always go to the flip side, which is if you hear stories about a ghost walking up the steps and you hear the steps creak, well, the scientific side of me says, well, that means that that ghost or whatever you want to call it has to have enough mass or density or stuff to exert pressure on that step to make it creak. So the scientific part of me is like, let's have devices, and we do, that are basically pressure plates that will try to measure that. And if the psychic says there's something over there, then we'll move that equipment there. So, since I've worked with the psychics over the number of years, they know that I do believe them, but that I need more to sort of validate that, because I can't just go on anybody's. It would be the same thing as if, you know, the three of us were on investigation and you said, I thought I saw something run by there. I can't immediately go ghost. We have to kind of build our cases there. And I tell people I firmly believe that we are all psychic to a certain extent. You know, we've all gone to a party, walked in and been like, I don't like that guy. And you're like, well, why? You don't know him. I get a weird vibe from him. I think that's being psychic to a certain degree. It's being able to sense or feel things that aren't tangible. So, as I said, a lot of psychics early on thought that I was just being a jackhole, and was
Mhm.
just like, was doubting them. And it wasn't that. It's just, I need more than you just sensing something. But we've also been able to flip that, because we used to go into investigations and it would be like, where's the activity happening? Okay, it's at the first floor bedroom and the second floor living room. Let's set up all the equipment and that's where we're going to go. And it's going back to, but maybe the ghost isn't in there right now. It's in another area of the house. So one of my team members, Josh, came up with he didn't, I don't think he meant for it to be a great saying, but I asked him one time, I'm like, where do you go? How do you figure out where you're going to set up on an investigation? And he said, I let the house tell me. And what we do is, after we set up all of our equipment, we set it up all over the house, and then we will all just randomly walk through the house quietly. Don't say anything. We don't even have equipment half the time. We'll run recorders, and then we'll come back and it'll be like, well, Josh, where did you feel that you should go? I want to go here. Okay, Wendy, what did you feel? I thought I sent something here. And that's where we kind of figure out where we're going to sort of start the investigation.
So it's kind of like more like the psychic ability part is more like an ingredient that you're looking
It,
for, rather than like
Yeah,
this
it's like
is
a
the
balance.
end all be all.
exactly. It's another, yeah, exactly. It's another tool. It's not, it'd be the same thing as that you can't confirm something's haunted if you just get something that's like an EVP. So yeah, it's like another tool in our, I don't know, ghostly arsenal or something like that.
Got you.
Wow. That's yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Like kind of like balancing the two things.
Hmm.
I think we're
You
let's
gotta
move
ask
on.
your Fae. Come
No,
on.
no,
Come
no
on.
one believes in the Fae except for me.
No, you don't know if he believes in
All
Fae
right.
or not.
How do you feel about the Fae?
Well, that's ridiculous. I've never heard of such a thing.
That's fine. I accept that.
I'm messing with you.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. I believe in all of these things. And I think where we don't know really what they are. Okay.
Right.
And you could say that across the board. You could say that about Bigfoot, the Loveland Frog, UFOs, ghosts, all of that falls into, we don't know what it is. So if you were to say to me, does the Loch Ness monster as this leftover dinosaur exist? I would say no. There's no way it could. That doesn't mean there's not something there that we call the Loch Ness monster. It could be something different. I think Fae fall into that as well. There are too many, because if you
Yeah.
broaden that, and as opposed to saying, well, they're kind of like fairies or they're the tree folk, or when you sort of broaden it and say, well, there are these creatures that are out in the wood, you can open that all the way up. And why does the Fae always have to be tiny? I think over time we've sort of put our own, we as humans love to put things in boxes, and it's always got to fit in that box. And if it doesn't fit, it's not real. But I think that Fae fall into that category, because if you look at it and you're like, it has to do this, and this is where it lives, and you got to put out this food for it, and you got to do this, you're kind of shrinking that box as to the reality. But if you open it up that there's something out there,
Yeah.
I think it's a possibility.
It almost like blurs the lines too of like what's a spirit, what's a Fae. It's okay to blur it too, because I don't think it, like you said, it doesn't quite fit in that box.
Yes, I think you're spot on. I tell people, I don't want to have all of the answers. I love that I live in a world where I don't know a bunch of stuff, and the fact that I don't know so much in this field as to what exists and what doesn't means there's so much more to discover. And that's really what I think this field should be about. It's just being open to the idea that, as arrogant and naive that as humans want to be, there is so much more out there that we have no idea what it is.
So other than Sleepy Hollow, is there any urban legend, folklore, myth, anything that you just absolutely just do not believe in? I know you mentioned Loch Ness, kind of like not the idea that something could be Loch Ness, but the story of Loch Ness. But is there anything maybe on a more broad scale that you have a hard time believing in?
I think if we were to widen the net, suggest the theory, I could probably come up with something. But I'm always, from a folklore and a historic perspective, I am always finding little nuggets where I'm like, okay, like I said, like the Loch Ness monster, it's like that exact creature couldn't exist, but, or I don't believe it does, but there could be something there. I mean, a great example is I am obsessed with, and I don't know why this is, but Ohio has more headless motorcycle ghosts per capita than any other state that I am aware of. And there is, I mean, there's two that I have been researching for decades. One of which, down in Oxford, Ohio, I have seen numerous times. The idea being that this guy lost his head when he was on his motorcycle, and you'll see the headlight coming towards you. And when I do these presentations, whenever I show that, the place goes nuts, because it basically, all the rational explanations, I point where those are. They say it's like a barn light and all this. I point all that out. The light is visible for about 20 seconds in the video. It's the dead of night, but it's giving out its own light reflecting on there. Now, the story is that that's supposed to be a headless guy riding a motorcycle. There's absolutely no way that I have yet to even find someone who died in a motorcycle accident on that road, let alone the house he's supposedly driving to is the house of his girlfriend. I mean, you don't get more stereotypical urban legend than that.
Yeah.
That house never existed, but that light is there. And people for decades have seen it, which leads me to believe, okay, I do not believe that that is a headless guy on a motorcycle, but I do believe that there is something supernatural taking place there. To bring the Fae back in, that was an area that we went back into, because the light it is always on the road. And we have been researching it for decades. I mean, I've seen it dozens of times. We tried to say, hey, is this actually more of a spook light? Is it Fae? Is it because is it off of the road? No, it's always in the road, in oncoming traffic coming right towards you. But we started looking at the idea, like when you look at spook lights, the idea that there is this light floating out in the woods. Okay, that could be Fae. Or you could actually say that's a UFO that's coming in for landing. So if I say that, is it Faye driving a UFO? No, I don't believe that that's what it is. But hey, it could be.
Yeah. Maybe that's why we have all those stickers where it's like look both ways for motorcycles. I see those everywhere.
I know. You actually
I don't know.
You totally just unlocked this memory for me. There's this street by my house. It's not a motorcycle, but it's supposedly this car. It was like a house where I grew up in, near Cleveland. And the street supposedly had this car that if you drive on midnight, there's this car that it's like a ghost car, and like gets up behind you and tailgates you for like a half a mile and then it vanishes.
It's a good urban legend.
Yeah, I don't know if it's true or not. It never happened to me. I was always too scared to go out at midnight.
But see, those are the stories that I always try to tell people. Ghost stories are a part of our history. Even if you can't validate that the ghost is real, that story keeps our history alive. You remember that when you were a kid. You probably remember, like you said, you were too scared to try it.
Yeah.
But it's part of your upbringing, you know. I mean, the whole idea of legend tripping, I mean, like I said, when I talk to people about that, and I'm like, did you ever find anything? And they're like, no, but you know, we drove up and we dared the one guy to get out. When he did, we all drove away and laughed at, you know. I mean, it becomes part of our culture.
So let's jump to gear really quick. And I'm not a technical person. Like this was my downfall in music. Like when you get to like the different gadgets and gizmos, like I suck at that. But is there any new equipment that you're really excited about? And a double part question, do you believe any of the like iPhone ghost finder apps?
No, I don't believe in the apps. And
Yeah.
I don't believe in the vast majority of the ghost equipment that's out there. I tell people,
Oh.
if somebody is selling you a meter that has a sticker on it that says ghost meter, they've just tripled the price. That's a cell phone sensor that they put a ghost meter sticker over. Um, but that being said, what again, going back to the idea of, if you boil down what a ghost is supposed to be, it's nothing more than a form of energy. So the pseudoscientist in me says, if that's true, there has to be a way to measure that energy. So I do think things like EMF detectors, non-contact thermometers, those sort of things do have applications, because if you are all of a sudden got an EMF detector that's flat, and you're not waving it around, so it's not detecting the battery off the back, it's just sitting there and it's flat for hours, and then all of a sudden it jumps to like a 10 or a 12, you can at least start saying, well, that could be paranormal, or somebody just turned on the plasma TV downstairs or something like that. Um, so we use a lot of those pieces of equipment on investigations. One of the more recent ones that we really like is the trip wires, which are the individual EMFs that are actually strung together on a long line. They are cut, and I bought them. I don't get them for free. I'm not trying to endorse anything or get, some
Sure.
ghost stop bucks or something from it. But they're strung together on a long line, but they illuminate. So it's kind of got like they're kind of like the K2s, in that they have the spectrum lights that pop up based on the level of EMFs. Those really come in handy, because what we do is, I think we have a 10-foot one and a 20-foot one or something like, but you can stretch them down entire hallways. And since they will light up, the idea again, if people says, well, the ghost always walks down the hallway, well, those should then trigger individually. So you can set in a remote location, put a camera on it, do something like that, and see if these things are triggering as they come down the hallway.
Oh.
Mm.
So yeah, we're always looking at, I think our favorite piece of equipment that we've had forever, we call it our capos, but it's basically a Vernier Lab Pro system, which is um, it's designed for high school science experiments. And it's basically a data logger, which you can then plug into like a laptop, and it charts everything. You can change the time. Like, we actually take readings every half second. So off the data logger, you can plug in, we've got like something like 12 different sensors. So if somebody says, if we feel cold breezes go up and down the hallway, well, we can plug in 3 ambient temperature sensors, one at the front of the hallway, one in the middle, one at the end, and then watch in real time if there's any changes. We can detect everything from electromagnetic, static electricity, polar shifts, all kinds of crazy things. So it's kind of a neat thing to have, because you go in and people say, well, this happens and this happens. And we're like, okay, we'll need this, this, and this. Um, Incredibly expensive. But I tell people, if they're getting into this and they're like, what kind of equipment should I use? Because none of this stuff is ever cheap. We have, this is a shameless plug, but it's free, but we've been putting out for 20 somewhat years, the Ghosts of Ohio newsletter, which comes out every other month. We email it to you. We don't sell your email address. It's free. If you go to ghostofohio.org, all 20 years of it are on there. Part of what we do is we buy all of this latest trend stuff, and then we break them open,
Mm-hmm.
because we're like, let's see if this thing is really doing what it's supposed to do. That's why we discovered very early on that I'm incredibly old, because the Frank's boxes, they're just radios that they've clipped the scan function on. So
Oh,
those are the things that you
That's
supposedly hear work. Yeah,
the
yeah.
chat
that's it,
boxes.
scanning the stations, and it never stops. So you can tell when they're using it, because it goes.
Yeah.
And then you hear like bits and pieces of voices,
Yeah.
which are basically the disc jockeys. You
Mm.
know what? Now, that's all it is. They'll tell, and then they do things like you can get the apps that put an echo chamber on, and basically they're taking poor man's guitar pedal effects
Yeah.
and applying it to these things. Why you would want to do that, I don't know. They're like, well, you can play it backwards and you can put an echo on it. And I'm like, when you're taking just a quick half-second voice and then you're putting a delay and an echo on it, you're just stretching it out. You're not actually changing. You're
Mm.
changing what the message could be saying. Now, that being said, we've gone on investigations. What I tell people is if you have one and it's scanning, you can watch and see that it's scanning the dial. The joke is they always tell you put it on AM because if it's on FM, you're going to get like Ghostly Stairway to Heaven or something like that. But they want it on AM because that's
Yeah.
traditionally just voices.
Mhm.
Watch as it's scanning. And when you hear a voice, note the time. The newer ones, actually, the screen lights up. So you can tell what the station number is. So say you hear something at 6:10 a.m. Make a note of that because it's going to come right back around again. If it comes back to 6:10 and you hear that same voice again, you throw it out. It's the
Right.
but if all of a sudden it's gone and it never comes back again, that's something that's a bit more intriguing. So yeah, I always tell people the one piece of equipment I always want to bring is my own intuition, because that's what's really going to, as I said, Josh's thing, let the house guide you where
Hmm.
you want to go. And I think, if especially if you've been on an investigation in a place numerous times, you know what the normal noises are, you know what the normal things are, so just open yourself up to it. I also tell people, like, don't do what I did for the first 5 or 6 years of my career, which was we'd show up, drive like 2.5 hours, get there, spend another 2 hours setting all the equipment up. I have now ingested far too much caffeine. And then it's like, turn off the lights and let's investigate, and you've got like the Java jobs and you're like, everything's a ghost and you're all over the place and you can't figure it out. But what we do is once we set up all of the equipment, we take a 15-minute break. Some people go off and they pray. Other people in the group kind of do a protection thing. Other people just decompress. What I like to do is I make a mental note of all of the things that I have to do when I get home that night. I got to put the mortgage in the mail. I got to do this and this.
Mm.
But then I tell myself, but right now I'm here to investigate and I'm going to open myself up and just have the experience, be there and just live in the moment and try to make myself as open to having that experience. Because I also put myself in the ghost shoes and it's like, we go to a place that's kind of been investigated to death, no pun intended. And I can't help but think, like, when the next round of ghost hunters show up at a place, that the ghosts are like, oh man,
Here we
not
go
tonight.
again. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going down to the house down the street. So we go in, we introduce ourselves, we say that we've come a long way just to see you, and we just try to be like, open ourselves up for that experience more.
Gotcha. You've joked about aging yourself a couple times, but put the mortgage in the mail, I think.
I know. I was like, oh, I would do that.
Oh,
It's
that's
coming.
funny.
Yeah, I don't remember the one time where I went to bed and said, when I get up in the morning, I want to be an adult and have all responsible. I don't know when that happened.
It
So
just
careful,
pops up.
guys. It's just going to hit you. It's just all of a sudden it's there. And you're like, wait, why am I supposed to know how to fix this thing? I don't know.
Yeah.
So
But here I can give you advice on that. This is the
yeah.
advice. You're going to use it. Trust me. Every time I give advice to this, okay? If you are married or in a relationship and somebody's like, oh man, why is the dishwasher making that noise, or the garage door won't open? It's a ghost. It's just say it's a ghost, because if you don't, you got to fix it.
Yeah.
So you
might
just
get
be
me in
like,
more
no,
trouble.
it's a ghost, man. I don't know. Everything's fine. It's a ghost. Can't help
Yeah, don't worry about it. It's just it is what it is.
Steph might
it.
kill
It's a
me.
ghost.
I
Yeah,
know.
it's just a
You
ghost.
say it's a fae.
Tell it's a fae. Yeah.
There you
So,
go. See?
so before we jump off, just because I have a history with writing and you've churned out so many books over the years, I'm very interested to hear your writing process. Kind of like, are you one of the people that just open up a Word doc and go? Do you structure it out like, the chapters? I know you have like anthologies. Do you like structure it that way? Is it hours at a time, short periods throughout many months? Like, what is your writing process like?
Oh, do you outline? 'Cause I teach English a little, and I always stress like outlining.
Yeah, but some people just
But do you do that, or
Yeah.
is that just a myth?
a myth.
No, I mean, I'm kind of all over the place. And I tell people that I don't know how good of a writer I really am, but I'm a damn good storyteller. And
That's true.
so what I do is that how I fell into all of this is that I just would go to these places, and kind of where the whole weird Ohio and all these weird state books came from was that I would go somewhere, and I'm giving away the secrets here, but um, we've all done this. We've all been driving down a road somewhere and we've gone, that's weird. I wonder what the story is with that. I just turned around. That's the only thing I did differently. But then I would come home with these stories and I'd be like, this is a really cool story. And I had to just get it out of my head. And so what I started doing is, because I did not yet have the wherewithal or the patience to actually sit down and just start pounding it out. So everybody, since I was little, was like, you tell really good stories. I got a digital voice recorder
Yeah.
and I recorded myself, and I was like, okay, so you got to check this story out. And I would just go on, just get it out, not on paper at that point. It was just get it out into a recorder. So I'm a pretty good typist, I guess. Because that's what I would do. I would play it back and then
Yeah.
bang it out. And then I would go back in and then I would sort of clean it up.
Sure.
When it came to the stories that are um, my book, Ohio's Historic Haunts, which I did with Kent State University, and there was no pressure there because they said this is the first time any university has put out a ghost book anywhere. And I was like, oh, okay, no pressure. But they wanted the history of each of the locations. And so that was a lot of research. That was the dreaded microfiche and doing things like that. And then I bit myself in the butt because my premise was that each chapter featured a historic building in Ohio. And the first third of each chapter was straight history: when it was built, what it was there for. The second third was the interviews of the owners and people who have visited who thought they had a ghost encounter. And then the third part was me getting locked in the building overnight with the fancy ghost equipment to see if I could experience things. The second third, the ghostly encounters, I thought I do not want to go out on the internet and look up stories like that. I want to hear it one-on-one interviews. So that if anybody reads it, and it worked out that way, and they said, did that person really have that ghostly encounter? I could say, I don't know. But I looked them in the eyes across the table and never called BS. They believed they had that encounter. That ended up being like 220 hours worth of interviews I had to go through. So Ohio's Historic Haunts was 3 years in the making. And that was rough because that wasn't just talking about Bloody Mary or the Hook Man,
Sure.
and just recounting it. So it's a lot of, and also, I've got a wife and a daughter, and they have always come first. So I tell people I want to have a day job on top of that. So I tell people that I sell my soul during the day and I buy it back at night. So it's finding those,
That's really good.
Sleep's
That's
overrated
really good.
anyway. So
Oh my man, now we're talking. No, I like that. Sell my soul during the day and I buy it back in the night. That's really good.
That's a great structure for a book too.
Yeah. My
Yeah.
just so you know, we both have used like the weird books, Weird Ohio,
Absolutely.
Weird Indiana. But my experience is the Big Book of Ohio Ghost Stories. That's where
Oh,
the name
love
connected,
it.
because they're just like the anthologies. You just eat them up. They're just like popcorn. It's like I'll read a couple before I go to bed, and then it's like, oh, I've gone through this many pages. It's one of
Oh,
those.
that is cool. Thank you for saying that. It's
Absolutely. All right, so we're coming up on our time, but so one last final question for you. How was the Loveland Frogman Festival?
that it was amazing. I mean, it's funny because I need to say that, I've had a long, very long, decades long relationship with the Loveland Frog. I mean, down to I collect all of their things, and it was never a thing. I mean, it's my little unofficial mascot that kind of hangs out near the.
Oh,
He's
look at that
complete
wand.
with
He's got the
complete with the
wand.
magic
Yes.
wand. Yeah. I've always been obsessed with it, if for no other reason that you can point at that and go, that's why we're weird in Ohio.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very easy to do that because everybody's got Bigfoot, but in Ohio we've got to be weird. And we're like, yeah, but we have a grass man,
Yeah.
or Loch
Yeah.
Ness monster. We have South Bay Bessie, but there's nothing like the Loveland Frog.
No.
Um, and I have a dear friend, Jeff Craig, who did the Hidden Ohio map and Map in Black, and I've known him. He was a member of the Ghosts of Ohio back in early 2000s when he was doing the Hidden Ohio map, and we kind of got close because he at one point I was trying to figure out, there's a story around Athens, Ohio, which is that if you take the five largest cemeteries
Oh,
around
Yeah.
Athens,
is that
it forms
The-
the shape of a
I
pentagram.
think we talked about
you
that.
in Ohio University?
Yeah,
You
we
did.
talked about
Yeah.
that.
Yes, with Wilson Hall or Ohio University in
Yes.
the middle. So Jeff is a cartographer. He's a map guy by trade. So we had always talked about that, and I'd always thought, it'd be kind of neat to plot those things out. Well, he did that, and long story short, about a year and a half ago, I was like, I'm going to put that in my Southern Ohio Legends and Lore, and I wanted to interview him, and I want to put some of the drawings, his illustrations from the map in there. And that's when he brought up that he wanted to do the Loveland Frogman Festival, and
Mhm.
he wanted me to speak at it because he knew that I give all these crazy speeches, and I think he originally thought that I would say that I would talk on ghosts, and then I was like, I want to talk about the Frogman, and he's like, "Is you got to talk for 45 minutes? Can you do that?" And I'm like, "If I cut it down, I can," because a lot of people are like, kind of like what we were talking about earlier, like, what the heck is it? I mean, I opened the presentation where I was like, be it frog or be it man, because some people it's like a little oversized frog. Some people say it's an iguana. Some people say it had a magic wand, all over the place. Well, I've
Hmm.
spent 20 somewhat years tracing this story and all of the fake things that are in there. Um, because when you talk about the creature, there's they fall into one of two categories. The people either are like, there is no way in heck that thing exists. And then there's the rest of us who are like, I don't think it does, but I really want it to. I
That's
really want it to, and it's
yeah.
got to have the wand. Um,
He's got to.
and I did. It's a different topic for a different day. You'll have to have me back, but there is. I did find sightings of a humanoid, not a frog. It just had a mouth like a frog, and it got
Mm.
lumped in. They were they looked to be aliens, and one of them had a metal rod in his
Oh.
hand. It became this amalgam of the Loveland Frog, but the 1955 was 3.5 foot tall.
Mhm.
That's where I always say, ladies and gentlemen, the Loveland Frog just became a man. Um, but there are sightings of that all over the place. I mean, I've tracked down the supposed businessman. He wasn't a businessman, but he was 19 years old. The guy who saw it in 1955 wasn't a traveling Bible salesman or anything
Mm.
like that. But I got names from all. But anyway, Jeff, he worked his butt off for that, and he and I think everybody else were like, but is anybody going to come to this? And I think there were about 2,000 people, I think he said, showed up.
Wow.
I know
I'm
that for
super
my
jealous.
presentation, yeah, it was fantastic. It was, I know that for my presentation, I'm just thankful the local safety chief wasn't there, because Jeff just kept putting more and more chairs in there.
Yeah.
And at one point, I saw the back doors were open, and there were just people like kind of craning their necks because it was packed. He had a,
So they weren't
he
6
did a-
feet apart.
I don't even think they were 6 inches apart. It was, yeah, it was,
People made friends.
more ways than one, I think. But yeah, it was amazing. And how I ended the presentation, my presentation was like, and to think that we all came here because of an oversized frog with a magic wand, and it's like, whether or not you believed in it or you don't, in today's world where it's just so easy to hate each other and be mean, I said, I just look around here and all I see are just smiles. So we were all, just because of an oversized frog with a magic wand, we just decided we're going to come out here and have fun. And Jeff did a great job at bringing in vendors from all over the place that just had unique, not even all Frogman stuff. There was a bunch of Mothman and Flatwoods Monster, but just really unique stuff there. So yeah, it was a great time. You'll
Yeah,
have to bug him and tell him to do it again next year.
Yes, I really hope so.
Yeah, I was there in spirit, but
Yeah, it's like we found out about too late, but it's like I'd love to either be a vendor or just to go there and just enjoy and just soak it all in. Because for us, so many of these conventions are so far, and that's like a 3.5, 4 hour drive for us.
We went down to Loveland and we did our live episode there.
Yeah, for the Frogman. So for Halloween.
Oh, please don't tell me you went to a bridge.
No.
Okay.
Is that a park?
Some park.
We went to a park where we felt like the cops wouldn't, because we have lights and stuff. So we were like,
I know exactly where you were. Yeah, that's and I can probably guess maybe where you got that version of the story from. But no, those are two separate.
Yeah.
We went anywhere we could, honestly.
Yeah, it was pretty much anywhere we thought a cop wouldn't come by and be like, "What are you guys doing here?"
And we had to explain ourselves.
11 p.m. It's like, nothing. They'd probably find out and be like, nerds.
Yeah.
Oh man. Well, James, we really appreciate your time. For anybody listening, where can they learn more about you, and where can they find out more about your research teams and everything?
The easiest way is you can go, if you like the ghost stuff, you can go to ghostofohio.org. My author site and all my other crazy stuff is strangeandspookyworld.com, and that's where you can find my books and all that kind of stuff. And then this is a good thing to close on. When I was a little kid, what we were talking about earlier, growing up, all of the they weren't my friends, but my classmates used to tease me and they called me Weird Willis. But now, and you can try this, if you Google Weird Willis, you get me and all my books and all my crazy stuff. So, I mean, yeah, I turned being weird into a career. So yeah, I tell people, if you can't find me on social media or anything like that, just Google Weird Willis and you'll find me.
That's awesome. That is awesome. Well, James, we appreciate your time for hanging out, answering some of our questions, and have a great rest of your day, man. Thank you.
Hey, it's my pleasure. Talk soon.